Hi everyone, Mayor Drew Dilkins here. I'm standing in front of the Canderel Building, and I think many who lived and been in Windsor for any period of time understand that in the late 1990s, the City Council of the day was faced with the threat that our largest employer's headquarters, Chrysler Canada, was looking at leaving the City of Windsor. So in late 1999, the City Council of the day decided to enter into an agreement to take down the Richmond Landing block and look at building and helping to fund the construction of this building and parking garage behind me. And at the time, in 1999, they budgeted $25.7 million to do this work. By the time we got to 2002, those costs had increased to $36 million. And when the project was entirely done, the amount was almost $50 million. Now, I'm not here to second guess the decisions made by the Council of the Day 15 years ago. I'm not here to play Monday morning quarterback. All I can tell you is that those decisions were very, very expensive for taxpayers. And so City Council has agreed to remove the City of Windsor and taxpayers from any future obligations that we have on the Canderel project, some of which last until 2101. So come on inside, we'll go inside. I'm happy to walk you through the numbers and the entire decision so you have a better understanding why we agreed to do this. So the agreements for the Canderel project involved many different contractual obligations. And you'll see these obligations take us as far as 99 years to the year 2101, many of them. But in a total, the obligations include the tower airspace lease and that option. There was a commercial airspace lease and an option as well. There was an office tower lease, there were elevator lounge fees, and there are also parking obligations. So with respect to the tower airspace lease and option, EuroPro, who's the company that now owns the Canderel property, does not own the land underneath the tower. The City of Windsor owns that land. And EuroPro pays us $272,500 annually in lease payments to lease that land underneath their building. They have the option at any time of their choosing to come into the City of Windsor and purchase that land, and it's completely at their choice. And the purchase price would be just over $4.5 million. In satisfaction of that future obligation, the City of Windsor holds a bond, and so EuroPro would simply come in, they would pay that obligation off, and we would give them back their bond. To date, the city has received over $4 million in lease payments from EuroPro. There's also a lease with respect to the commercial airspace, and there's an option on the commercial airspace as well. And people will know what the commercial airspace is if you think of where the keg is, where Investors Group is on the main floor of the Canderel property. EuroPro does not own the land underneath the commercial space on the main floor. They do have an option, or they have a lease rather, for this land at the cost of $1 per year for 99 years. So until the year 2101, they can simply pay the city $1 per year to lease all of that land. They have an option to purchase this land as well for the value of $1.1 million, and they can do that at any time of their choosing. But with such a favorable lease rate, we don't believe that they would ever purchase the land unless the underlying value of the land is greater than the purchase price and they intended on selling the building. Otherwise, any reasonable person is going to continue to lease that land for $1 a year because that's the number that just makes sense. It doesn't get any cheaper than that. There is also an office tower lease. So part of the agreement that the City of Windsor made when this building was constructed was that we would lease 2 floors in the tower for 20 years. And that lease takes us until August 31st, 2022. In total, there's just over almost 28,000 square feet on 2 floors. And what we've done in order to bring some revenue in, we've sublet as much space as we can possibly sublet on the floors that we own just to generate some revenue and savings for taxpayers. And so we've sublet all but 4,000 square feet of the space that we're leasing. And from the city's perspective, we pay EuroPro $1.1 million a year to lease that space. And you say, okay, well, that's great. That's what you pay. How much do you bring in? In total, we bring in $297,000 from the tenants that sublet that space. And so you can see there's still quite a difference between the amount we pay and the amount we receive. And so that is a great exposure for taxpayers, again, for an additional 5 more years. If you use the parking garage or you walk through the Canderel building, you will see elevators, of course, that lead from the building down to the garage. There are 6,000 square feet of elevator lounges that exist to satisfy and service folks who use the garage and satisfy the tenants who need to access the building to the garage. And so these elevator lounges necessarily encroach into the office tower space. And the city spends, and we're contractually obligated to provide EuroPro with $98,000 a year in common area maintenance fees for this lounge space. And again, this lounge space, this contractual obligation exists until and continues until August 31st, 2022. However, after that time period, the lounges don't disappear. We don't shut the garage down and the elevators down. The lounges continue to exist. And so EuroPro and the City of Windsor have differing opinions with respect to that ongoing obligation. And we don't believe, from the city's perspective, that we will have to pay $98,000 a year moving forward. But we know that we won't get it for free either. That there is an ongoing obligation until 2101 with respect to those elevator lounges. So we anticipate, if we met in the middle, if it's not zero and it's $98,000, we anticipate that we would have an ongoing annual expense of $49,000 a year until 2101. The parking obligations are very interesting. So that garage, the Canderel garage, has a total of 521 parking spaces. 126 are underground, 395 are above ground parking spaces, and Fiat Chrysler has a contractual right to 475 of those spaces until the year 2042. And at the time when the agreement was made, lease rates here for Fiat Chrysler were very favorable, and we can only adjust the price that's charged for parking to Fiat Chrysler by the Consumer Price Index, and we can only do that every 5 years. And so part of the obligation we have is also to maintain and provide parking until the year 2101. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many garages that are 99 years old. They generally have a limited lifespan, so there is a risk to the city for a future obligation which could be significant. In addition, the revenue restrictions that exist result in the parking garage running a deficit. So on average, it's lost about $100,000 annually. You say, well, what do you mean by revenue restrictions? Well, this garage is different than the other garages that we own. We can't sell monthly passes in there to outside folks. So we're limited, and the building the garage is basically built to serve the building. And so we have these obligations which could be very significant in the future, and we also have other obligations that if tenants come forward and say they need space, that we have to provide them space either in the Doherty garage down the road or within one block, subject to the approval of the building owners, and that would be at our expense. So there's an obligation here that it could be quite cumbersome, if not today, certainly moving forward for the taxpayers. So what's our goal in this whole thing? What are we trying to accomplish? Well, in 2012, the City of Windsor paid off all outstanding debt on the project. We owe no more debt with respect to the Canderel project. But our goal this time around is to completely remove the City of Windsor and the taxpayers from the Canderel project and eliminate all future obligations on this project, to remove taxpayers from the project entirely. And so there are really two components that we have to think about when doing this. One is selling the parking garage that we own, and the other is resolving all the other matters related to the land and the leases and the elevator lounges. All of those things together will help extricate taxpayers from future obligations. So let's look at what it means with the parking garage and where we are with the parking garage. So this parking garage, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it does not function like a typical parking garage the city owns, whether it's Polisher and Goya. We do not sell monthly passes to the outside for this garage. There is hourly parking available for this garage, but even that is limited. And by the way, after this deal is concluded, the EuroPro will commit to continue offering hourly parking to folks. But with respect to this parking garage, here are the numbers. In 2017, MPAC assessed that parking garage at $2.6 million. We went and commissioned a third-party certified appraiser to come in and look at the value of the garage. That appraiser determined that the garage is worth $4.4 million. And so what we're proposing here and what City Council has approved is selling the garage to EuroPro for $6 million. And you might say, well, why the heck would EuroPro pay more than the appraised value of the garage? And that's a great question. And the reality is this garage has value to them above the appraised value. It's called contributory value. And it's worth more to EuroPro simply because it satisfies their building. It's completely designed to be interlinked and connected to their building and to provide smooth and efficient tenancies and operations to their facility. So there's contributory value to EuroPro. And the benefit of us selling the parking garage is that we remove the $100,000 annual operating loss. But in addition, we know moving forward, like every structure that we own, that there will be costs to maintain this garage. So even 15 years in, we know there are costs over $1 million that we could put into that garage today in terms of capital maintenance. And so we hired LP Meyer and Associates, structural engineering firm, to look out over the next 50 years and say, what are the capital life cycle costs on that garage for the next 50 years? And if you bring it down to what we call net present value, or today's dollars, we're looking at about an $8.7 million capital cost over the next 50 years. And you say, well, 50 years, that's a long time. And you're right, it is a long time. But don't forget, our parking obligation goes to 2101. So if you're looking out 50 years and it takes you to 2067 or 2068, we still have an ongoing obligation after that for which significant dollars would be required by taxpayers. Let's look at all the other matters that we just went over a few minutes ago. And so all of the numbers that you see on this slide, we've distilled them down to net present value dollars. That basically means we're looking at what it would be worth in today's dollars if we took all of this stream of payments and revenue over that contractual future horizon. And so if we sell, and if we had to pay for the next 5 years, if we had to pay EuroPro $1.1 million to lease those 2 floors, which we're obligated to do, the net present value of that is $5.179 million in today's dollars. But don't forget, we recover rent payments because we sublet that space. So if we take the rent payments that we receive, you would see a credit there of $1.339 million. Now, we also know that there are elevator lounge fees that we talked about at $49,000 a year. And so if we pay those elevator lounge fees starting on September 1st, 2022, to the end of our contractual obligation in 2101, that will cost taxpayers an additional $2.3 million in today's dollars. The other part that's good here in terms of value for the property tax base is that EuroPro will now be making payments over the next 50 years or 50 plus years in terms of the property tax that they have to pay to run the garage. And that will bring in an additional $3.1 million to city coffers. So if you look at the subtotal of all the benefits, we're at $9.2 million in terms of the subtotal of the benefits related to all those other matters. But we can't forget that we can receive as a city $4.5 million at any time from EuroPro if they want to buy the land. So there's proceeds that we would otherwise receive of $4.5 million. So if we subtract that off, the net benefit to the city in resolving all of these matters today is worth $4.7 million. So you can see the total value to taxpayers is really $10.7 million. $6 million in cash that we'll get from EuroPro for them buying the garage, and then $4.7 million in benefits from resolving all of those other issues that have been thorny issues, sticky issues, and quite frankly, very expensive issues over the last several years. The next slide here talks about the effect on our operating budget. What will it mean to our 2018 operating budget moving forward? And so we know we won't have to pay the $1.1 million in lease payments and CAMs to EuroPro. But we also won't receive the revenue that we received from the subtenants of $297,000. We will also stop receiving the airspace lease, that $272,000 that EuroPro pays us every year. So the net benefit, the net property tax levy benefit, is just over $500,000 for the 2018 budget. Plus we have the benefit that we will no longer have to pay property tax from one pocket to the next, and that's worth about $127,000 a year. So the total net operating benefit to the city for 2018 is nearly $700,000. So the good news here is that as of January 1st, 2018, taxpayers will have no further obligation to the Canderel project or to that building. Now, I know many people have asked questions, and so I've tried to answer some of the most common questions that people have. First one being, why now? The other one, why sell this parking garage? Why not RFP the sale of this garage? And what will you do with the money you receive? So let me go through the answers there. Question is, why now? Why would we do this transaction now? Well, you need to know that EuroPro purchased this building in 2016. And almost immediately they were interested in the garage and the economic development opportunities associated with the garage. And they're interested in tidying things up that were otherwise fairly messy over the years. And what we were interested in from the city perspective was disentangling the city from all of those issues that are either costly, ambiguous, unclear, or going to be, frankly, very, very expensive until 2101. And so we began the work last year in 2016 to get the engineering report, to get the appraisal done on the garage, and then we negotiated with EuroPro for many months here as we had the right numbers in front of us and felt like we were in a better informed position to have negotiations. Some have said, why would you sell this parking garage? You also own Polisher, you own Goyu. Why choose this garage in particular? And so I think it's worth noting, and I think people can appreciate, that the Canderel garage is different than the other garages we own. This garage was purpose-built for tenants of the Canderel Building. It really is not built to serve everyone else in the City of Windsor. We do not sell any monthly passes for this garage. And frankly, why would we sell this garage? We have risky obligations that exist to 2101. And this is a good chance to disentangle and reduce and remove all of those obligations that taxpayers are on the hook for the next 80 years, frankly. And this garage is important because we know over time, we've had some history negotiating with Canderel and with EuroPro and the previous owners, and the negotiations that they have with their prospective tenants always have to stop and come to the City of Windsor because EuroPro, or the building owner, is not able to give any guarantees with respect to parking in that garage. They always have to come to the city to make side deals with the city to see if they can get space when they're going after prospective tenants. It's clumsy, and frankly, it's better for economic development if the building owners are able to work directly with the parking and satisfy all the parking obligations of their tenants moving forward. So another common question that we've been asked is, why would you not undertake a request for proposal, an RFP on this particular garage? Why would you just sell it directly and sole source it directly to EuroPro? And so we know that this garage was purpose-built to serve the building. And frankly, selling it to anyone but the building owner does not help us resolve all of the outstanding issues and expenses that we know exist through the contracts on this building. The building owner also has the first right of refusal under the contract. And so this garage, because the way it's built and the parties it serves and the obligations that exist for parking in the garage, the value for any other purchaser is likely very low due to the restrictive parking obligations. And so what that means, even though we know the garage is worth $4.4 million on an appraised value, if we put it out on the street and a third party comes in and says, yeah, we'll buy the garage and we'll give you $3 million, well, we have to go back to EuroPro and say, okay, you have the first right of refusal on this garage, and the highest bidder was $3 million. We may end up getting half of what we've negotiated on that particular structure. And then the other issue that I've raised here is with respect to economic disruption. So if you have someone who is looking at Windsor to make an investment or already owns commercial space in the City of Windsor, and they have the free cash to be able to purchase this garage, even if they were going to give you $6 million for it. If they come in, their goal is going to be disruptive. They're going to want to make it uncomfortable and be disruptive for the tenants in that building and cause the tenants to seek alternate locations for their offices. And so we don't want this to become an economic disruptor. We want everything to work in harmony here and to function so that we're actually creating economic development opportunities and not making things more difficult. Some have asked, what will you do with the money? And frankly, that's really up to City Council to decide what they want to do with the $6 million that we'll receive from the sale of the garage. But my goal certainly is to look at our other parking assets. So we know we own Goyu, we know we own Polisher, and I've been very clear saying that I think those two assets stink and they look like dumps to me. And I want to make investments in those assets to bring them up to a better standard and to make people feel safe and comfortable in our parking garages. Whether you are a tourist to the city, whether you live here, I want you to feel safe and comfortable. So we're talking about new paint, we're talking about better flooring, we're talking about increased lighting, we're talking about enhanced security cameras in the garages. Again, all of this is to make sure people feel safe and comfortable, and our garages need a little TLC. So I'm trying not to spend $6 million in the garage, but if we took half of that number, or a little over half of that number, I think we could make significant investments in both Goyu and Polisher that would make folks who use those garages feel better about the assets that we own. There are also 2 staff members that work in the Canderel garage, and our goal is not to let those staff members go. We want to keep them. We want to move them over to Goyu and Polisher and improve the standard that we offer in those garages. Make sure that we're cleaning up after people who urinate in the garages, who throw garbage in the stairwells, all of those things. We want to make sure that the experience is a good experience. So keeping those 2 staff members are important for me as well. So I can't change the past, but when I play the hand that I'm dealt, looking forward in the best interest of taxpayers, saving them or providing value to them of at least $10.7 million for the future ongoing costs of this project behind us, I think makes a lot of sense for taxpayers. It's the right thing to do, and selling the garage to EuroPro and putting all of that structure under one common ownership makes a lot of sense for economic development opportunities for our city, but for taxpayers as well. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions about this or anything else going on in the city, please feel free to reach out to me at the email address on the screen.